done to protect people against future tragedies, such as what happened with glycerin, heparin, and melamine, number one? And number two is whose responsibility? We can take a look at the FDA, the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, we can take a look at companies, and quite frankly, other regulatory agencies as well outside, India, China, and other countries as well, EU.
Not sure that everybody in the audience know how really close we were to a total disaster on the heparin. Baxter had 50% of the market, and the other 50% also came from China, but was not affected. And if it had been, then we'd have a serious problem. And the problem is everything comes from China, from this particular one. But ironically, we used to get heparin also from cattle, from beef. Why don't we? Because we didn't want to get the terrible English mad cow disease, so everything went to pigs, a lot of pigs in China. And if you look back, I think something which actually stimulated this scam was really, I think, several years ago, there was a terrible outbreak of swine flu in pigs in China. A lot of pigs were slaughtered. And the heparin business is really a very low margin business. There's not much margin in it at all. And suddenly your raw material, your pigs, half of them have gone. So I suspect the price went up. But this scam was incredibly sophisticated, make no bones about it. The oversulfated chondroitin sulfate had been known in a couple of publications, pretty rare, and was known to have heparin-like activity. But to actually make this is not a simple in-the-kitchen operation. It's sophisticated and it's large scale. And somebody in the know told me that he suspected there was still 1.5 tons of this sitting in China, still looking for a place to go.
I think it took the FDA a month to actually figure out what it was, and it took them a month of chemistry just to identify it as oversulfated chondroitin. And in addition, one thing to keep in mind about what's similar about all three examples that you gave, the glycerin, the melamine, and the heparin, is that all three involved deliberate attempts to introduce adulterated products into the supply chain.
Yes, there's a difference between, as you were pointing out, the heparin, this adulterant was made deliberately. In the other cases, melamine and glycerin, which it's much cheaper just putting radiator fluid in than glycerin. Never mind, of course, it kills people. But melamine itself, the interesting thing about melamine was if it had been pure melamine, there wouldn't have been so much deaths in dogs and cats or in babies. It's not pure melamine. The problem is it's junk melamine with loads of various other things in. And the thing which kills the babies or the cats and the dogs is actually a dimer formed, one with melamine and one with cyanuric acid. And this crystallizes out in the kidneys, and therefore you have kidney failure. So melamine itself is actually not terribly toxic. I'm not advocating that it's okay, but I mean, on its own, if it had been pure, that's far too expensive. So this was, another scam where they were just picking something else up, which was available, as against making something very specific.
And the nature of the responsibility is that you know, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you are responsible for everything that happens all the way back through the supply chain, and it means that in order to truly be responsible, you need to have a state-of-the-art adulteration risk program. It's just not enough, we know, to test things. You have to have a program in place that proactively goes as deep into the supply chain as necessary to ferret out possible adulteration. If you're not doing that, you're not doing your job.
Supply chain is limited to the reliability of supply, with not so much of focus given on the internal supply chain of the manufacturer. And I think that's an area which internally, of course, the responsibility rests squarely with the manufacturer, both ethically, morally. If I may say, to the front end of the supply chain, the rear end, the internal supply chain of the manufacturer probably requires equal amount of rigor in terms of auditing.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the only effective regulatory control over this whole system right now is the lawsuit that comes against the company after Baxter. that there's, can't get into it today, although I get into it in China 2020, but there's deep institutional reasons why the Chinese regulatory system is decades away from being anything, offering anything close to a reasonable regulatory system. This isn't a matter of they're going to get their act together in 2 or 3 years. There's deep legal problems within China, deep regulatory problems. They extend, into the pharmaceutical regulatory area, and obviously the FDA is, undermanned in China. I mean, it's kind of absurd if you think about it. 75% of the API is being manufactured over there, but only like 2% of FDA staff is over there. That needs to be reversed.
I want to add something just very quickly. I thought it was an opportunity for the FDA to come out and really build a lot of credibility. But if you go back and look at, in fact, the transcripts on the FDA website, they had a press conference after all this. And they said that they were able to identify what the impurity was, and it did take about a month, using new techniques like NMR and HPLC. That's a quote.
It's only one of the problems. They actually went to China and went to the plant that was supposedly producing it, and it was actually the wrong company.
Right. That's right.
And in fact, I've been to 3 of Dingle Committee's hearings. It's interesting. The FDA does not know how many foreign facilities they have registered. On 3 different occasions, Dingle's committee, I mean, these guys, the FDA is such an easy target. It's just, and I am really not a big fan of Congressman Dingle and his committee. But on 3 occasions, he asked the FDA for the number of foreign facilities that they had registered. Each time they gave him a different number.
From my point of view, I don't agree with Michael, which is perception about the overall regulatory practice in China. I think that the practical way for this issue is to do real and effective supply qualification from both FDA point of view and also the purchase point of view. So Chinese government now announced a policy. Those who export heparin or some other substance to United States must register with SFDA. If not, SFDA will not be responsible for any such problem incurred in such raw material.
You've just described the problem in a nutshell. I mean,
But
the
this is
SFDA
the
will not be responsible is the operative phrase.
Because FDA or other authority as a European, they go to China, they don't care the GMP which is certified by SFDA. They say, we don't care if you have Chinese GMP or not. If we certify you as GMP compliant, you can supply to us. From my point of view, in terms of language, in terms of culture, FDA inspector, either FDA inspector or US purchaser are not quite